Groundhog's Day once again for the second time today. I hate it having to do videos over again. But the other video was going far, far, far too slow. Meghan McCain wants Fauci fired, and she is not afraid of saying so. She went into a rant about the whole vaccination thing and everything else in the rollout, but people are going to hit her on that because they always find ways to hit her on it, and oftentimes it's ridicule is justified. But on this one, there's something buried in what she's saying that I actually think makes sense. And I think is somewhat of a valid point and honestly a valid critique about Fauci. So this is going to be probably the first video I've ever done with a weak defense of Meghan McCain. But nevertheless, here it is. This is going to be the soapbox's weak defense of Meghan McCain because despite some of the stuff being overbearing, she does have a point. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is a Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do this. This video, look, I didn't necessarily entirely see anything wrong with the video in extreme sense. There's some things that she says in here that are kind of just overblown. But she clearly doesn't want Fauci to keep that job. And she has clearly defined Fauci as being the person responsible for the botched vaccine rollout. That may be more of a factor of the previous president and some factor of Joe Biden being into this, not to mention the various states and lack of supply and everything else. It's not necessarily a defense in that sense, but I'm just making the point that there are reasons for it that go beyond just Fauci and Joe Biden. Nevertheless, her deeper point in this, I think, makes sense, even though she doesn't really flesh out and explain the deeper point, at least not in this particular segment. So let's give her a chance to make a point, and let's see where I agree with her on.
The fact that I, Meghan McCain, co-host of The View, I don't know when or how I will be able to get a vaccine because the roll.
Wait, let's stop there for a moment. Let's stop there for a moment. Let's not start, just as a piece of advice, with I, Meghan McCain, co-host of The View, the fact that I can't get my vaccine or I don't know where I'm going to get my vaccine. It comes across as massively self-important. When I was a software engineer, I honestly would make the point that I built civilizations. I mean, the code that I wrote, the process path that the information was going to flow, I built that. I thought about that stuff in the moment. I crafted the database. I crafted the code. I crafted the way the system was set up. Yes, I was massively proud of doing that particular job because, like I said, we built civilization. We kept civilization ticking along and humming. That was a real thing. If anything happened to the engineers of this country, society will come to a crawl almost immediately. It is an indispensable part of our society, not just of this particular nation. That I consider to be real. That I consider to be somewhat important. You do television, and you have your dad's last name. You're a talking head on television. And honestly, I don't mean to be brutal, but if you vanished today, no one would care. Don't get me wrong. There'll be some people that say, where's Meghan? But they will put another white woman there. They may or may not have a famous last name, and they will keep ticking along. And within a day or so, that person will be co-host of The View also. It will be that simple. It would be that straightforward. There would not be all that hysteria, at least not anything that would last more than a week. And the world would keep moving. So, starting off as I, Meghan McCain, co-host of The View. A little strong. Just my advice, my point of view. Let's keep going. I'm gonna let her finish this because I don't want to interrupt her point.
The fact that I, Meghan McCain, co-host of The View, I don't know when or how I will be able to get a vaccine because the rollout for my age range and my health is so nebulous. I have no idea when and how I can get it. I want to get it. If you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, I will go any place at any time to get it. I want to be responsible and obviously wait my turn. But this rollout has been a disaster. And I understand, obviously, President Trump can take much of the blame. But now we're in the Biden administration. I, for one, would like something to look forward to and to hope for, because if getting the vaccine means that just nothing changes and we have to wait another few years till everyone gets it, there's already a lot of people not getting it. We're already having a messaging problem getting people to take this vaccine. So I'm over Dr. Fauci. I think we need to have more people giving more opinions. And I honestly, quite frankly, I think the Biden administration should remove him and put someone else in place that maybe does understand science or can talk to other countries about how we can be more like these places that are doing this successfully.
The dig about science, I have no idea where that comes from. Honestly, I don't. That dig makes no sense to me at all. Fauci clearly knows science. That's his job. That's his job. So, I don't necessarily know where that part comes from. But I do think at a deeper level, she does have a point. And she's not fleshing it out. It comes across as, I don't know this, and I want to do this, and I want blah, 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 blah. It comes across as that. But there is a deeper point. Regarding the wearing of the mask and the various restrictions to businesses, there is a gray area of subjectivity involving the concept of risk. And I think that's where it becomes less medical and more political, which is, I think, the point that she's getting at with the whole thing with Fauci and the control that Fauci seems to have over the entirety of the process, or at the very least in the thinking of media and the Biden administration. God banned Fauci. There's something to be said for questioning Fauci that I don't necessarily think is wrong. It's just that it was done so ridiculously during the Trump era, it was somewhat tarnished in trying to go after him for some of the stuff. And media basically accepts his word as the law of God. And an increasingly vaccinated population, risks should conceptually dwindle as the number of people who are dying and being infected also dwindle. I think that's a rational deduction. Within a rapidly changing situation, how do you calculate risk associated with the virus? And just as important, when does the level of risk decrease to the point where the level of restriction becomes overbearing? At which point does the risk not outweigh the things that you're doing, meaning the things that you're doing are basically worse than the risk itself? When does the negatives of economic and individual restrictions outweigh the dwindling positives of seclusion? Dwindling, I say, because the potency of seclusion was in the lowering the chance of spreading the infection. If the vaccines offer immunity, then the value of seclusion, especially for people who are vaccinated, diminish by some intangible factor the more people that get vaccinated. I think that's, again, pretty straightforward. You've taken the course to remedy the virus. Great. The number of people are falling. The number of people who are infected are falling because of the process of mass vaccinations. Great. How do you get back to normal without ruining the process? And if possible, how do you speed the process along? That's the question that the administration has to answer. And that is not a medical question. By definition, also almost, that is a question that is political. Your science advisors can weigh in, but the decision is larger and includes more variables than it did when 5,000 people were dying a day from the virus. We are not in the same spot. That's the point that I'm making. As far as I can tell, the point is valid. You must understand, Americans, on some level, are selfish. We don't think we are, but we are rabidly individualistic. As long as the chance of getting the illness was shared, the preponderance of the population, everybody being vulnerable, was willing to accept this kind of collective seclusion. Meaning when you ask the public, they would be like 60-70% says, yes, we're okay with staying in because we don't necessarily want to get sick. We're okay with wearing our mask because we don't want to get sick. We're okay with the businesses on some level shutting down because we don't necessarily want to get sick. And everybody, for the most part, en masse, would agree. The more people that get vaccinated, the less unity that will remain on this agreement and on social distancing. The less people that will be in the camp of the vulnerable, by definition, the more people that will be in the camp of the not vulnerable. This skew to invincibility will create greater pressure to eliminate the restrictions, especially with pressure built on people being held down for the last year. meaning there is all sorts of momentum on people breaking out and doing stuff in public in this kind of socializing, especially since for the last year they have been stuck in the house. Yes, most of it accepting, but at the same token, people like me hate it. Absolutely hate it. I hate wearing a mask, hate being stuck in the house. By the same token, I hate getting sick more. So I, like most, just do it. Fauci clearly knows science, but the truth is the job diminishes as the virus diminishes. His job diminishes as the virus diminishes. When there are not 5,000 people dying a day, Fauci should not get the run of the roost and the decision making. He knows, however, meaning Fauci, that he's a public figure, and if he's asked something about this stuff, he's going to give somewhat of a dire prediction to ensure that at the very least he's not wrong on it too soon, like Trump saying the ridiculous thing about the church service in April when, 2 years, a year later, people are still going. Fauci says this on CNN, and this is morbid, and I think it misses something. Let's play the clip.
You think Americans will still be wearing masks, for example, in 2022?
I think it is possible that that's the case. As we get into the fall and the winter by the end of the year, I agree with the president completely that we will be approaching a degree of normality. It may or may not be precisely the way it was in November of 2019, but it'll be much, much better than what we're doing.
Fauci is basically saying a new normal. He's talking about people wearing masks all the way up to 2022. This is with the vaccine, meaning how much of your population is going to be vaccinated by the end of the year? And are you telling me that the number of people that are going to be vaccinated by the end of the year, that could, I would imagine you should be able to get all, if not the overwhelming majority of the people in the country vaccinated. And you're still making the argument that people need to social distance even with the vaccine, and for that matter, people need to still wear masks and all of this other stuff. I don't know if that's going to go over well, especially as I made the point before. You have unity on this notion of people staying in the house and everything else. That unity is going to quickly diminish the more people who get vaccinated, because those people are going to get vaccinated for the very explicit point in not having the social distance. And if you tell them that, yeah, you still need to wear masks and you still need the social distance, you're going to get problems associated with that. You're not going to get a unified front on that, because people like me and people like other people who are getting, will get the vaccine are going to say, well, wait a minute, what point did I get the vaccine for? What is the point of getting the vaccine if I'm still stuck with these guidelines, still stuck in the house and social distancing? That's kind of the point, right? At some point, this becomes a political question, not a medical question. And at that point, I think there's subjectivity. And I think this is kind of where I think Meghan McCain's point is correct, or at the very least a deeper point that's being made. What Fauci said there is sad and depressing, and it looks like Fauci is about to fall asleep and is running on automatic pilot. Recently, at a webcast, Dr. Fauci, a 90-year-old California woman, asked Dr. Fauci about resuming a Meghan game with her vaccinated friends. He told her, "You're asking a very logical question." He says, "Hang on." He's expecting updates to the CDC guidelines. What do you mean, hang on? You're saying that I've gotten vaccinated, my friends got vaccinated, and we can't hang on to play Meghan? That is not going to go over well. The very point that the question was asked gets across what her intent and what she wants to do. And whether or not Fauci gives the okay or not, I would put to you that they're probably going to be paying Meghan. Apparently, the vaccines are great at preventing symptomatic COVID-19, particularly the severe illness and death. So think of it this way. A person gets the vaccine. That person, under normal circumstances, may have ended up in a hospital or may have died. But with the vaccine, that person may get sniffles or he may not get sick at all. But they are uncertain as to whether or not a person who got vaccinated and yet has the virus, or for that matter, is asymptomatic with the virus despite getting the vaccine, can pass it. And so their response is, well, let's not take the chance of being able to pass it to somebody else who may not necessarily be vaccinated. But like I said, the more people that are vaccinated, the less potency that argument is going to have, because there are good people going to be pissed off. If you get 70% of the population vaccinated, you are not going to be able to maintain the policy of economic restrictions and social distancing without the public getting very pissed off at you doing that. I'm making the point that social cohesion breaks down the more people that get vaccinated, because those people are getting vaccinated for the explicit purpose of being able to leave their houses, go to their businesses, and go back to what they consider to be a normal life. We right now have devices on Mars. Do you know how far away Mars is? Do you know that Mars is flying through space at fantastic speeds, and we're basically shooting a bullet from our planet that is using gravitation and everything else in order to get it from a point A to point B, to land and to rover, and to send back fascinating, stunning pictures of not just Mars, but also Jupiter and some of the other planets. But we can't get a vaccine rollout fast enough. Whatever powers that are necessary to put to this, you need to do it. Donald Trump's failure was the virus. Joe Biden's failure, if he doesn't get this correctly, would be the vaccine, because that is his job at this point. Getting that vaccine out as fast as possible and into many people's hands as possible. Whatever powers you need to put behind to get that process done, because you will be judged by that first and foremost as your main and first mission. 500,000 people have just died. This is going to be the thing you're going to be judged by, not by the COVID thing in and of itself. I'm making the point that Meghan McCain have a point here. I'm not going to hate on her for making this point about the nebulous area where risk is no longer balanced by the onerous restrictions that are put up. And like I said, that's not a science question at that point. Science may give a purview and a point of view, but at a certain point, this becomes a public discussion, and what the public would allow, what the public is willing to accept. And honestly, the fact that the question exists at all means, on some level, what Meghan McCain's saying here is right. I'm not necessarily taking a position on when there is, or what spot that is, where those things kind of match up in alignment. I'm more so just making a point that the question is indeed valid. The question should be asked. And, Fauci is not God-man. Fauci, his necessity will diminish the further along this goes with the vaccines are hopefully, ideally, working. The number of deaths continue to go down. The number of infections continue to go down. And at that point, I am telling you, this notion of keeping these restrictions in place are going to become that much more contentious. Meghan McCain has a point here. She's whining about not getting a vaccine. Fair enough. And all things being equal, yeah, we should have all the powers in the world put to make sure those vaccines can get out, make sure those vaccines are fast. If you need to ramp it up, then ramp it up. If you need to give certain benefits like you did in the Second World War to make that work, yeah, that's your main job. You should do it, especially considering everything that took place leading up to this and the failures that took place where you have 500,000 Americans that are dead. Yes, I think that the public demands reparations, but at the very least, from the standpoint of the question that is being asked here, I don't think it's unfair to ask the question of when, if we get all of these people vaccinated, when does it get to the point where the restrictions are worse and more deleterious than the consequences or even the risk of going out and potentially catching COVID? It's a fair point. It's a very fair point. People may want to take a shot at Meghan McCain for this. But that said, what she's saying here is not entirely wrong. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. No, I'm not going to give a point of view in regards to when, because I got to be honest, I'm not sure what that point is. It's more so just the argument or the contention is of course valid. It becomes a political question at a certain point, not necessarily just a question of science. And so, yeah, I have no issue at all with questioning, saying, hey, at what point do we get to go out? At what point are all of these people getting vaccinated? Is there this kind of herd or mass immunity that makes it sufficient where other people can go out safely? Yeah, that question should be asked because people are getting sick of being in the house. I am sick of being in the house. And, yes, it sounds like she's whining about whatever, but that doesn't mean she has a point or doesn't have a point. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.